first of all, anything can be distorted or changed. Alcohol can be used to cleanse a wound, but alcohol can also be used for drunkenness or addiction to alcohol. So it depends on how it's used, but in and of itself, religion can be used for good and for evil. I would also argue that in the history of the world, the non-religious community, the secular community, has created more evil in the world than the religious communities combined. If you take a look at Tsarist Russia or Communist Russia, Stalin, 30 million people murdered. If you look at the Nazis, 11-point-something million people murdered. That makes all the evil ever done by religions in combination throughout history pale by comparison. So I think that religion can be used for good or for bad, and it really depends on the individuals and how they're going to misinterpret it, I think.
Okay, same question for Dr. Freeland.
Well, I've heard a lot of pretty good answers already. I would agree that religion can be it's not in itself a source of evil, but it sometimes seems to provoke people into doing evil because it creates divisions among humans. And so people see other people as different and see them as, misguided or as quote-unquote sinful or evil, and they feel self-righteous, and so there's a sense in which they become committed to their own religion to the extent of ignoring the idea that other people might be right or other people have a right to their own system of belief. So insofar as it causes any kind of sense of being an elect or being self-righteous, I do think sometimes it's a source of evil, and I would point to many examples, in the Protestant Reformation and in the Crusades, when religion has led to a lot of atrocities.
Well, it just strikes me. I mean, there's always this kind of demonic temptation to pride and self-love, and I think that can happen with the religious tradition too, when it becomes subverted that way by people for whom the tradition, in a certain way, just becomes another way in which they love themselves, even to the point of the contempt of God and of the good order of things that God has created.
How do you corral, I know this is a way out there question, how do you corral or contain the essence or that being of evil within a religious tradition or faith? You have some who have gone to the extreme or outside of what your basic faith teaches, and they've kind of used, as you say, religion for an evil source. Is there any kind of accountability factor in your faith that brings that person back into the knowledge of what the word really is and what it says? Rabbi?
Absolutely. In Judaism, there is a tradition of interpretation of Scripture expressed through the Talmud and other Jewish writings. And if someone proclaims something to be Jewish and is very much to the contrary, the rest of the Jewish world would be up in arms about it and disclaim them and counteract them and quote other sections of Bible and Talmud and other Jewish religious writings to show how they were wrong. And I think it always winds up being a part of the members of a religious group to cry out against their co-religionists when their co-religionists misrepresent the faith.
Okay, Imam, same question. How do you do that? How do you corral and get people to go by what your word is saying?
I believe it's very easy for for the Muslims, because we always have the traditions of the Prophet, peace be upon him, which is the explanation of the Quran. So we have always anyone who claims anything, we try to verify this through the Quran and the tradition. And the Prophet himself warned people that there will be people who will go to the extreme. So you need to check, are they following the tradition or not? So that's why Islam, until now, we need from time to time to look at the ideas to reform, but Islam did not change, unlike many other religions where you have other sects coming and saying this should be interpreted this way. So the same thing, we have sources where we have to refer to, and we have to verify whatever is said.
And how do you get, I guess...
And that's why, that's why many times when you hear some bizarre things from people who claim to be Muslims or from anything, you check their credentials, they don't really have the knowledge.
We should check them, or should your faith come out and say, okay, this is not what we believe in this. Okay, because sometimes I'm not hearing that from most of us. Like when an abortion clinic is blown up, I'm not hearing enough from other Christians to say, hey, we don't condone this. It's just like, we don't believe in abortion, but you're not hearing
Right. This isn't the way.
This isn't the way. So I guess I'm looking for more accountability, and how do we get to that from these areas of faith, Dr. Freeland?
Well, that's where we philosophers come in.
Well, go ahead and get to it.
Yeah, right. We're the rational people, and we, as members of our profession, we don't adhere to any one religion, and so we're open to sort of critical reasoning about what's going on with different faiths. And so I think, the philosophers often assume we become the devil's advocate, quote unquote, just to try to provide challenges to religious dogmatism.
That was a real good quote or a phrase for this show, Evil, the devil's advocate. Okay.
I think that for Christians, the fundamental essence of the gospel is the law of the cross, which is overcoming evil through self-giving love. Mm-hmm. And then that's the touchstone for any kind of authentic Christian practice or spirituality is, does it embrace the cross, which always is a challenge to us, to this self-giving love, which returns not evil for evil, but a blessing for evil.
How do we explain the different human cruelties? And you touched on it earlier. We talk about slavery, the Holocaust, 9/11, mass murder, ethnic cleansing. How do we explain that as a part of our human nature and done by people sometimes who say they do it in the name of a religion? How do we explain those?
Well, in Judaism, we believe that, and this actually reflects something that the Imam said, that in Judaism we are made with two inclinations, an inclination to do good and an inclination to do evil. And we make ourselves good or we make ourselves evil by our choices. And the way that God set up the world is that we are equally free to choose the evil as we are equally free to choose the good. And unfortunately, it means people are permitted to make gas chambers instead of hospitals.
Same question.
Well, in the Christian tradition, generally, we would affirm that God created human beings good with a rightly ordered love to love things in an appropriate way, but that from the beginning of human history, there's always been this corruption of that and desiring things in a disordered way, so that history is shaped by this dialectic of self-love and the love of God, selfish love, I should say. And so, I wouldn't be comfortable to talk about something like the essence of evil, because it seems to me it's not so much an essence, it's the disordering of good things, so that always there are disordered desires shaping human history from the beginning of our race.
I don't think anybody can possibly answer this, but let's just shoot for it. How can humans who are created in God's image, as we all believe, get to such a level of cruelty or evilness? I mean, I know you said it's an essence or it's a disorder, but how do we even get to that point? Imam?
When you forget that you are all humans, that this person, although he looks outwardly different, but from within he's the same, just like a green apple and red apple, we're all the same. That's what the Quran says, that all humans were honored, and there is no virtue for anyone over the other by race, by color. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, always reminded people that you are all equal. But the problem sometimes when we forget that and we try to alienate, oh, you look different, so you are dehumanized, you are less than me, so I have the right to do whatever I want. I label you with something, that means I have the right also to do what I want. Unfortunately, this sometimes happens, and that's why we have these cruel acts sometimes.
Dr. Freeland?
I really like the book by the 20th century philosopher Hannah Arendt called Eichmann in Jerusalem. She covered the Eichmann trial, and she came up with this phrase, the banality of evil. I think, based on horror movie figures like Hannibal Lecter or vampires, we think that evil is kind of fascinating and deep and monstrous, and the monstrous person wants to do all these horrible things. But the thing about Eichmann that everybody said was that he was normal. He just was trying to do his job. And so there's the idea that in banal evil, you're just sort of going on and looking at your own life and just forgetting about what the consequences are. So he's just running the trains, and he's kind of ignoring where the train's going. They're taking the people to the camps. So I think, maybe evil doesn't require a conscious choice to be evil, but it involves that kind of act of omission. You're just sort of forgetting, like the Imam said, you're forgetting the fellow humanity of others, and you're not looking at the consequences. You're sort of living for convenience's sake.
Yeah. That Eichmann story is a good example, too, of the way in which you're caught up in an evil that's pervasive in human history and human societies and political orders and so forth. So it's something bigger than the individual in a way.
I also think that there's a line in Judaism that a mitzvah goreret mitzvah, that doing a commandment of God leads to doing another commandment. Similarly, doing a sin leads to another sin. And I think what happens with people, with human beings, is that they may begin neither good nor bad, but they start making a choice, which makes it easier to lead to another choice in the same direction. If they do one thing that's bad, it can lead to something that's worse, which can lead to something that is horrible, and it just becomes easier as time goes by.
Yeah. Are we born good and sidetracked by evil events, or are we born into a nature of evil and striving toward a mark of good?